So I've treated my flock for poultry lice. Oh, for crying out. So I've treated my flock for poultry lice. They still technically have scaly leg mites. And now I've got roundworms. Not me, of course, but the chickens. I'm exhausted already. Can I take a nap? Hey y'all, I'm Renee, and welcome to Tater Town, and to part 3 of my parasite series. To recap, in part 1, I gave you an overview of parasites and what you can do to help prevent them, and of course, what symptoms to look for in your chickens that let you know that they may be having a problem with parasites. In part 2, I started showing you how to treat parasites when those preventions fail for one reason or another. And specifically, I showed you how I treated a poultry lice outbreak in my flock. The flock that already had the beginnings of a scaly leg mite outbreak and ended up with a roundworm issue as well. So let's tackle that now. Like I said in the last video, I brought my highly active, energetic hen Lil. Well, I brought her inside after she began exhibiting some unusual lethargy and a pale comb and wattles. I treated her for the poultry lice and gave her some supportive care, and not long after, I found this in her poop. Yep, that's a roundworm. And with roundworms, I treat the chickens with Fenbendazole. The brand name is Panacur or Safeguard. It's very effective and has a wide safety margin. And it's actually even easier now because Safeguard makes a Safeguard Aquasol for poultry, which is a water suspension. Before, you could only get the Aquasol in a large, very expensive amount, but they finally started selling it in 3 milliliter bottles. It's still on the expensive side, but it's worth it because one bottle will treat your flock for 5 days by simply adding it to their water. Of course, the overall flock weight needs to be greater than 22 pounds and under 264 pounds. And you'll still need to repeat this process in another 10 to 14 days. Now, I'm sure some of you are saying, but can't you just use the Safeguard for goats liquid suspension in their water? I'm getting better at catching her. That's it, you're down. Some of you are saying, can't you just use the Safeguard for goats liquid suspension in their water? Some people certainly do that, but it's not water soluble and it won't stay mixed into the water. So there's no guarantee your chickens will get the amount of drug that they need. The only way to guarantee that they get it is to administer it to each bird with a syringe for 5 days and then repeat that in another 2 weeks. Yep, I've been there. So if you have a decent sized flock and you can afford it, I'd personally use the Safeguard Aquasol for poultry. If you only have a few birds, the Safeguard 10% liquid suspension for goats is going to be the cheapest, and it's really not that difficult to administer. As for dosing with the Fenbendazole, specifically the 10% suspension for goats, the typical Fenbendazole dose is going to be 10 to 50 milligrams per kilogram of chicken weight. And the Safeguard 10% suspension for goats has 100 milligrams per 1 milliliter. So if you have a 5-pound chicken, that is the equivalent of 2.26 kilograms. I tend to err on the side of the lower end dose, and this is what my vet had prescribed for my chickens when they had roundworms before. So if you take 10 milligrams times 2.26 kilograms, that means that 5-pound chicken needs to receive 22.6 milligrams of Fenbendazole. The Safeguard, there's 100 milligrams per 1 milliliter. So in order to figure out how many millimeters you're going to give your chicken, you take the dose for that particular chicken, which is 22.6 milligrams, and you divide that by the concentrated amount of the Safeguard, which is 100 milligrams, and that gives you 0.23 milliliters. So in 0.23 milliliters of that liquid Safeguard, there is 22.6 milligrams of Fenbendazole. It's actually 0.226 milliliters, but I rounded up to 0.23. One more time. Get a little bigger. Ideally, you want to administer any oral medication in the back of the throat. But here's the tricky part. The hole you see right behind their tongue, this is the opening to their airway. So you don't want to get any liquid or food or any other material in that area, because if you do, it's the same as if you inhale liquid or inhale food. It can cause aspiration, and if it doesn't cause immediate aspiration, it can lead to things later on down the road like pneumonia or
other serious lung problems. What you want to do is get it into their esophagus, which is that entire area behind that small opening on either side. But since some of you may be doing this for the first time, or maybe you're unsure about avoiding that area and you don't want to hurt your chicken.
What I like to do, especially with something this little amount, is I like to hold their head, put my finger in between their beak, good boy, and then let him drink it on its own. And I have to do it again. And again, just kind of at the end there, and let them drink it on their own, right? Good boy. Good boy. You did good. Yes, you did, Stina. Good boy. Now, the only way to know for sure if your chicken has internal parasites is if you can see it in their poop or if you test their poop, which you can do at home. And I would love to show you how, but I need a few more pieces of equipment that will help me to show you what to look for. And of course, I'd probably need another infestation. I'd really rather not have that happen just so I can make a video. Anyway, Fenbendazole will treat both roundworms and cecal worms. It is, however, not recommended to use in chickens that are actively molting because it can cause feather deformities. So if your flock is molting, you may want to wait until they are finished before using it, but I'd highly recommend you make this decision with a vet because it may be more important to treat them than to have feather damage. And like all parasites, internal or external, they are highly contagious. So you need to do a deep clean in their coop and run. That means removing all their bedding, scrubbing all the surfaces with hot soapy water if you can. You need to let it dry and then sprinkle some diatomaceous earth or garden or agricultural lime on the floor before putting in your fresh bedding. Here's the hardest part. When you see the adult worms, that means there's eggs. And while the adult worm can't survive long outside the body, their eggs can survive months to years in the environment and on surfaces. And there's not much that can kill them. So you can't scrub or disinfect. I mean, you can, but you won't get them all and it won't kill them. If you have a roundworm infestation, there's a pretty good chance you're gonna have a recurrence later on because of the eggs that are still gonna be surviving in the environment. So if you free range your chickens, the best thing to do is to move them to a new area if you can. If they're in a run, depending on what your flooring situation is, there's not much you can do. The only effective way to kill the eggs is with time and or high heat. And by high heat, I'm talking about greater than 158 degrees Fahrenheit or 70 degrees Celsius. But this will take several minutes of exposure. The higher the temperature, the shorter the time it takes to inactivate the eggs. Temperatures above 176 degrees Fahrenheit or 80 degrees Celsius can inactivate roundworm eggs in just a few seconds. So if you have a steam cleaner that can reach at least 170 degrees Fahrenheit or 77 degrees Celsius, I highly recommend using it to clean all the surfaces in your hen house after you've removed the old bedding. I would also recommend treating any surfaces in your run and the flooring. Now, I have wood chips over soil, and those eggs can migrate into deeper layers of the soil. So if I use heat, I'm still probably only killing the eggs on the surface, but at least I'm reducing the numbers. Doing the run is a challenge. So I use a propane torch. Now I do this with an abundance of caution, and while it's effective, it comes with a huge risk of starting a fire. I have personal experience with this. When I use the torch, I quickly move it over the ground and also treat all the surfaces that the chickens hang out on. But again, I don't linger in any one area, and I stay away from anything that's plastic or that can melt. I never had any issues with this method until I did. And sure, I could choose not to share with you what I'm about to share with you, and I could hide the shame I felt by getting too complacent with my approach. But I do think it's important for you to see how easily something can go wrong, especially when all you have are positive past experiences. I will say all the chickens were safe and there was minimal damage. but it could have been so much more devastating than it was. I do also have smoke detectors in the shed, and I had previously been looking into building a fire suppression system. Even without a roundworm infestation, I still treat the ground with my torch a couple times a year and then spread some diatomaceous earth. Usually I do this when I'm replacing the flooring in the run, and I do this right after the chickens go in at night to roost. And one time there were a couple of embers that started a fire in two separate areas of the run. They caught the jungle gym on fire and also the salad bar. Now, I could not see the embers with my naked eye, but when I went back and reviewed the IR footage from my outdoor camera, those embers were totally obvious. And the fire burned from about 10 p.m. at night to 5 a.m. the next morning, when my dad called to tell me, very matter-of-factly, that there was a fire in the run. Luckily, those fires were so small and burned so slowly, but it was a wake-up call for me to pay more attention when I'm doing these treatments. So if you have a major worm infestation and you choose to treat with heat, be very careful if you use a torch, and really try to use steam or boiling water if you can. I would also like to mention that one of the reasons why that fire burned so slowly and was contained is because of how I treat the wood in their run. I don't use pressure treated lumber for anything that I make for the chickens, to include their salad bar. I instead use a technique for charring all the wood before I put it in their run. This method results in wood that provides weather, water, and pest resistance, but it also increases the fire resistance. The controlled burn of the wood, it removes the wood's combustible surface that results in a layer of carbon that insulates the core. This significantly slows down combustion, making it more difficult for the wood to catch fire in the first place. And depending on the circumstance, it allows for a much slower burn if it does catch fire. If you want to know more about that, you can check out my video on making a chicken salad bar. All right, so now all of my chickens have been treated with a 1-day dose of ivermectin for lice. Several days later, I started the flock on a course of Fenbendazole for the roundworms. I also cleaned out their hen house, scrubbed it down, and sprayed it all with the Electro-PSP, and treated the chickens themselves with the Electro-PSP as well. And I treated the ground and all the surfaces in the run with high heat. The last thing I wanted to do was work on their scaly leg mites. So keep an eye out for the next video when I finish up their treatment. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and thanks again for being here on Tater Town.
And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you can see more videos that will help you do those things you never thought you could.